So hey YouTube, this is going to be one of the most improv videos I've ever done. I'm just basically turning on a camera and then talking about this poster that I keep seeing on Facebook. And it's about a topic we've talked about before, homosexuality and whether or not homosexual marriage should be allowed. But this poster in particular says that, so you still think homosexuality is sinful, and therefore gays should not be allowed to marry. So while the poster takes the entirety of the critique is based on whether or not homosexuality is sinful, I think it's important to realize that there is a disconnect between what is sinful and what should or shouldn't be legal. So for example, a lot of things that are sinful are also illegal, but there are a lot of things that are sinful that aren't, like lust, premarital sex, adultery, lying, disrespecting your parents, being prideful, lazy. All those things would be considered sinful, but also things that most Christians wouldn't say ought to be illegal or ought to have legal punishment. But let's go ahead and jump into his critique of why he thinks homosexuality isn't sinful. And this is my friend, by the way. She's making me look super pale today. If you hang out with me too much, you might get in a YouTube video, so you gotta watch out. But not everything the poster says I think is worth looking into, but it does have a critique of both the New and Old Testament. So we'll look at what he has to say about that, and then throw our 2 cents in the ring. So to start off with, he says that the Old Testament says it's sinful to eat shellfish, to wear clothes woven with different fabrics, and to eat pork. So should we abide by all of the Old Testament laws? So what are your thoughts on that one?
Well, the problem is that there's 3 different types of Old Testament law, and you can't say that it's wrong to still live by all of them, because the moral laws do still apply, but the ones like shellfish and different cloth don't anymore.
Right. So what I think the author of the poster was not understanding or not aware of is that the Old Testament has social, ceremonial, and moral laws. So there's no Christian that's going to say that we have to live by one of the Old Testament laws, to say to kill a lamb whenever you commit a sin, because obviously those are done away with. But on the same hand, saying something like honor your father and mother is not something that people in the New Testament are going to say we're not supposed to follow anymore. So to say should we live by the Old Testament laws is not a question you can answer with yes or no, because it really depends on which Old Testament laws you're talking about. Moral laws we're still bound by, social and ceremonial we're not. So the question should be, is the prohibition against homosexuality a moral law, or is it a social or ceremonial law? And that's worth studying. Now his next point is about the New Testament. He says that the original language of the New Testament actually refers to male prostitution, molestation, or promiscuity, not committed same-sex relationships. So let's look at that first part here. I think he may actually have an interesting point there. I'm not sure ultimately that it matters, but it is certainly a better point than his comments about the Old Testament were. But his main critique here is about cherry-picking. He thinks that, well, his question is ultimately, should modern-day churches live by all of Paul's values? And he believes Paul speaks against homosexuality, but also thinks that Paul speaks against that women should be silent and never assume authority over the man. It seems to portray this as some kind of anti-feminist rhetoric found in Paul's values. What do you think about that?
Well, Paul does say women should be silent, or women shouldn't speak or have authority over man, but only within the context of the church. He's only talking about the early Christian church, and he's not saying that women should never speak. He's not being anti-feminist. It's just within that specific setting, within that time period. So if you take the lessons from that, apply it to today's church, it still does apply. So we should still be living by Paul's laws.
I think if you do any kind of look at a commentary or do any kind of topical search on wind's blowing out here. If you do any kind of Bible study and you look up what he's talking about in specific, you'll get a much different perspective than the anti-feminist kind of spin that the author of this poster seems to take away. So I'd recommend you guys do that if you're actually interested in that topic. he actually has some really interesting things to say, especially when you get into the man's role. It's not like a domineering over women type of scenario. He calls men to love women just like God loved the church, and God died for the church, so that's quite a call on men to step up to the plate and not to be this kind of slave runner or something. But it'd be interesting to study if you guys are interested. You have anything else to say about it?
I don't think so.
Alright, I think that wraps it up then. As always, test everything, hold on to the good. Alright, so if you enjoyed that video, I've made 3 additional videos on the topic of homosexual marriage. I had one talking about the difference between morality and law, one talking about the separation of church and state, and the last one talking about whether or not marriage was a human right. So if you click any of those links, it will take you to those videos, and you can watch those if you'd like to. I'll also put a link down to my friend's channel. I'll put it right here. And she makes music videos and stuff sometimes, so maybe you're interested in seeing that. And till next time.